Now, continuing our look ahead to the PDC World Championships, we've given our predictions for a title winner. I've gone with Chris Dobey. Burton, you've gone with Stephen Bunting. But what about a dark horse and any players to watch out for in this upcoming tournament?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting harder and harder to pick a dark horse each year because there's so many players that I think you can make a really good case for. And that's why I said in the first question that we talked about, you can make a case for maybe a dozen to 18 players who, if they have a good couple weeks, could be world champion this time around. But at least for, and Stephen Bunting might fall into the dark horse category that as well, even though he's, one of the top 8 seeds in this event. So I'm going to go for just players who have to play from the very first round. The non-seeded players is how I'm going to define it. And we were talking before, and I sent you 2 dark horses, and I'll go with those 2 here. One, and it's weird to give this player as a dark horse, but I mean, he's unseeded, lost all 3 matches at the Grand Slam of Darts somehow, but obviously is good enough, and that's Wessel Nijman. And his draw is really, really favorable. And he has to be the favorite to make it to the 3rd round. And honestly, I would even say on current form, I would make him the favorite of the 6 players in that little area to make it to the last 16. He should be able to get past the South African qualifier, Cameron Karelisen, in the 1st round, and he should get through Joe Cullen in the 2nd round, as Cullen is in really bad form right now. And then it's either Gerwyn Price or Kim Huybrechts or Keen Barry. And right now, I would say Wessel Nijman's playing better than any of those. And that would put him in the last 16, where could be Johnny Clayton, it could be Mickey Mansell, it could be Daryl Gurney, could be someone else as well. And I think that would be a very good last 16 match. I don't know who would be the favorite. I would think if Johnny Clayton is there or Daryl Gurney, it would be pretty close to even in the betting numbers, but it would certainly be winnable. This is a great draw for Wessel Nijman to make at the very least the last 16, and it really would not be that much of a surprise to see him on New Year's Day in the quarterfinals, or even to make it to the semifinals of what I think is the most wide open quarter. And that's why my other dark horse is also coming from this quarter. And it's not one player, it's 2 players, because they have to play each other in the 1st round. And I think I hinted to this a couple weeks ago when we talked, when the draw came out, as the match, or one of the matches in the 1st round I am most looking forward to. And that's Richard Veenstra against Alexis Toilo. I don't know which of these 2 players will win this match. Veenstra is a player who should be accomplishing more. He's doing well in the PDC, but he hasn't taken his game to that next level. I talked about it a year ago. He had some brutal draws. His first 22 Players' Championship events, he lost to only people who had been to televised finals or won Euro tours. So that tells you how tough of a draw he was getting, and that you had to be a really good player to beat him. But he hasn't taken advantage and pushed on. A player of his caliber should be winning more of those matches. And he hasn't been. And that's not to say he's not doing well. That's why he's qualified here relatively high up the Pro Tour Order of Merit in 14th. But I think he's a player who should be pushing on towards qualification for the World Match Player of the World's Grand Prix, and he hasn't done that yet. But Alexis Toilo was making pretty much every Asian Tour final for half the year. He did tail off a little bit at the back end of the year, but it didn't stop him from just having an unprecedented season. I think that is a really interesting 1st round tie, one that could go either way, and one that the winner of, I would fancy to beat Christoph Ratajski, and I would fancy to beat either Michael Smith or Kevin Dodds or Noah Lynn van Leuven in the 3rd round. I think this is a big opportunity for either of those players to make it well past Christmas because, well, I think they're both good enough. But only one of them obviously can, because one of them is going to be going home in the 1st round. As far as any other players to watch, I am curious to see, how our guest Rashad Sweeting gets on, a player we've never seen anyone from his country, let alone him, before at the World Championship. And I really want to see how a lot of these qualifiers from around the world go on. I'm going to name one more who I won't say is a dark horse, but I want to see what he does. And that's the Chinese qualifier, Zhong Xiaochen. We've seen him at the World Championships a few times before. He was 2-0 up on Kyle Anderson back in the 2020 World Championships, the last time we saw Kyle Anderson on the big stage. But he ended up losing that match. We've seen him multiple times in the World Cup of Darts. He is a very, very good Chinese player, the best probably that China's ever produced. And I think he's a player who, even if Ricardo Pacheco brings his best game, he can cause problems for. And we don't know which Ricardo Pacheco is going to show up right now. I think this is a good chance for him to get through the first round. So I'm going to point him out as well as a player I'm looking for. I'm not going to name him as a dark horse. I don't think his experience is there yet for me to think he can pull off a string of big wins, but I think he has that potential. He has a game, and maybe it'll be enough to finally get through that first round.
Some good picks there, and I really like the Wessel Nijman shout as well. We were discussing it at work earlier actually today. I didn't realise he's now the joint 7th favourite for the title, which is remarkable given on one hand this is only his second World Championship and he lost out in the first round on his debut, but on the other hand I guess it just shows how well he's done in his first year on the tour. You mentioned those performances at the Grand Slam a month ago. Yes, it was 3 defeats, but a tournament average of 107 even in defeat. I think a lot of people sat up and took notice of this young Dutchman, and he's a name that, forget the 32 international qualifiers for a moment, but all of the 32 seeds, they wanted to avoid him in that draw. And as it turns out, he's been placed in that bottom half of the draw away from the 2 Lukes, but still some tough hurdles to overcome if he is to get through past New Year's Eve into the last few days. And I know Gary Anderson, he's been touted the last few years as a dark horse by some, but 10-1, third favourite. I can't really sit here and say with a straight face that Anderson is my dark horse. He's playing too well at the moment, and he's a 2-time world champion as well. So my dark horse, I'm going to go with Gian van Veen, 40-1. Again, like Wessel, second time playing at Ali Pali, lost a close one in his first round on debut last year. But I just look at all the experience and match time he's banked in the 12 months since then. He is the PDC World Youth Champion. And yes, he had a fair bit of luck in the end to win that particular title with Urian van der Velde missing the match starts in the final a few weeks ago. But he took his chances, and going back to the Grand Slam, I touched on those averages for Wessel Nijman. Well, Van Veen topped that group in the end, and he ran Gary Anderson very close in the quarterfinals as well. And he's coming in as a seed this year as well, so he's going to avoid that tricky first round, which could be a help or a hindrance. We don't know, but I think Van Veen has got all the tools really to go far in this tournament, and possibly Rob Cross in the last 32, then possibly Nathan Aspinall in the last 16. But I don't think he gets fazed by the player anymore. He believes that he can do some damage. So he's going to be my dark horse to make a deep run. And just quickly, players to watch. Obviously, we've got to give a shout out to Reece Griffin, friend of the show, came through the tour card holder qualifiers. Nico Springer, I'm interested to see how he does on debut. Someone that I think we've been looking at for a few years now to maybe get his tour card or qualify for events like the World Championship, and he's done it this year. Sto Bunce, it's going to be his second crack at Ali Pali. I know he's pleased that he's not going to be playing on that opening night. He's going to have a little bit more time to adjust to things this time round. And lastly, one more, Alan Suter. I think it's nice to see him back at the Worlds. He missed it last year, but his first couple of years at Ali Pali really did make a mark, didn't he? I think he got to the last 16 in both years and picked up a few scalps. So yeah, a few names there in round one I'm looking forward to watching.